All right, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into migrating from AWS RDS to Aurora.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Yeah, and this knowledge can really help our listeners make informed decisions about their own databases.
That's right. Got to keep those databases humming.
Exactly. So before we jump in, Aurora offers some really compelling advantages over traditional RDS.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like faster performance,
Definitely.
much better high availability,
Uh-huh.
and built-in fault tolerance. It's a pretty powerful upgrade.
You said it. Like trading in your old bicycle for a sports car?
Like that analogy. So our mission today is to explore the three main methods for migrating from RDS to Aurora.
Sounds good.
We'll break down the pros and cons of each approach, and really highlight the ideal use cases so our listeners can choose the best fit for their specific needs.
Gotcha. And I think that'll help a lot of folks out there.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the first method, snapshot migration.
Okay, good place to start.
It seems pretty straightforward, right? You're essentially taking a snapshot of your existing RDS database, like a point-in-time copy.
Exactly. It's like, well, think of it like taking a picture of your data before you move it.
Okay, I like that. So then you use that snapshot to create a brand new Aurora instance.
Yep, that's the gist of it.
But is it really that simple?
Well, it's definitely one of the more beginner-friendly options.
Okay, good to know.
But there are a few things to keep in mind. For starters, your database isn't frozen while the snapshot's being taken.
Ah, so things are still happening in the background?
Exactly. Your applications can still read and write data.
I see. So it's not a perfect freeze frame?
Right. The snapshot might miss some of the very latest transactions.
So it's like taking a picture of a moving car, right? You capture most of it, but the wheels might be a bit blurry.
Uh-huh. Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
So once the snapshot is created, you then restore it to your new Aurora setup.
Yep, that's the next step.
And I imagine that's where the majority of the downtime happens.
That's right. The restoration process, it's like transferring a really big file.
Okay, so the bigger the database, the longer it takes.
Precisely. It can take, 15 minutes or more, depending on the size.
All right, so there is some downtime involved. But let's say downtime isn't a major concern. Are there any other potential drawbacks to consider with snapshot migration?
Well, it's extremely reliable for smaller databases.
Good.
But if you're dealing with massive amounts of data, like really huge data sets, and need to scale super quickly, snapshot migration might not be the most efficient option.
Got it. So simple and reliable, but maybe not the best choice for speed demons or those dealing with mountains of data.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Now, I've heard that there's a technique called incremental snapshots that can speed things up.
Yeah, incremental snapshots are pretty cool.
Can you maybe explain what those are and how they actually work?
Sure. So think of it like this. Imagine you take a photo every day for a week. Instead of storing 7 separate photos, taking up all that space, you could just store the first photo and then daily updates of what changed.
Ah, interesting.
That's essentially what incremental snapshots do. They only capture the changes made since the last full snapshot.
So instead of transferring the entire database every time, you're just transferring the updates.
Exactly. And that makes the restoration process much faster.
Ah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so snapshot migration is on the table. Now let's move on to option number 2, the Aurora Read Replica.
Okay, Read Replica. Good one.
This one seems a bit more, complex.
Little bit.
But it's also designed for minimal downtime, right?
That's right. Minimal downtime is the big draw here.
Okay, so with Aurora Read Replica, you're basically creating a live mirror of your existing RDS database.
Exactly. It's like having a backup that's constantly updating in real time.
Okay, I like that. But how does that live mirror actually work? What's happening behind the scenes?
Well, it uses something called asynchronous replication.
Asynchronous replication, okay.
It's, imagine you have 2 mirrors facing each other.
Right.
Anything you do in front of one mirror is reflected in the other, but there's a tiny delay.
Got it.
That's asynchronous replication. Changes made in your original RDS database are replicated to the Aurora replica.
Okay.
But there's that slight lag.
That lag, okay. But now I'm a little worried. If there's a delay, could we lose some data during the switch to Aurora?
That's a great question, and it's why monitoring that lag is absolutely crucial.
Okay, monitoring, got it.
You want that lag to be as close to 0 as possible before you promote the Aurora replica to be your main database.
I see.
That's how you minimize the risk of data loss.
Okay, so monitoring is key. But if everything goes smoothly and that lag is minimal, how long does it actually take to switch over to the Aurora replica? We're talking minutes, right?
Usually just a few minutes.
Okay, and that's a major advantage for applications that can't afford to be offline for very long.
Absolutely. Like an online store, for example.
Exactly. Now, thinking back to Snapshot Migration, rolling back seemed relatively simple if something went wrong.
Right. Pretty straightforward.
Is it the same with Aurora Read Replica?
Well, it is a bit more involved with Read Replica.
Okay.
Think of it like having a spare tire in your car. With Snapshot Migration, you just pop on the spare, you're good to go.
Right.
But with Read Replica, you might need to call a tow truck or even get a whole new car, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Okay, so it's faster, but the safety net isn't quite as straightforward.
That's a good way to put it.
That's something to definitely keep in mind. Now, for our final migration method, we have AWS DMS, the Continuous Replication Champion.
DMS, yeah.
It sounds like the express lane to Aurora.
You could say that. It's all about keeping those databases in sync with, minimal downtime.
Okay, so if minimal downtime is my top priority, DMS is probably the way to go.
It's definitely the best option for minimizing downtime and the risk of data loss.
Okay, good to know. But just like with any high-performance system, I imagine there are some specific requirements to keep in mind.
You got it.
Okay, I'm all ears. What do we need to know about those requirements?
Well, for starters, all tables in your database need to be set up for replication. It's like making sure everyone has a boarding pass before getting on a plane.
All right, so there's a bit more setup involved.
And each table needs a primary key, which is like a unique identifier for each row of data. Think of it as like a social security number for your data.
Okay, I see. So there's a little bit more prep work involved with DMS.
Yeah, you could say that.
But if minimizing downtime and data loss is paramount, then DMS sounds like it might be worth the extra effort.
It definitely could be.
All right, so we've thrown around some pretty technical terms like asynchronous replication.
Yeah.
For someone who's maybe, just starting out with AWS, could you explain what that means in a way that, well, anyone could understand?
Absolutely. Imagine you're telling a friend a story over the phone. You say something, and there's a slight delay before they hear it on their end, right?
Yeah.
It's basically how asynchronous replication works.
Ah, that's a great analogy. And it highlights why monitoring that lag is so important.
Right. You don't want to miss the ending of the story.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about those three main migration methods: Snapshot Migration, Aurora Read Replica, and AWS DMS. But I think it would really help to see how these actually work in the real world.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get specific.
Perfect. So let's imagine a scenario like an e-commerce company.
Okay, yeah.
And their RDS database, it's mission critical, right? It's storing everything: product information, customer orders.
The whole shebang.
Exactly. And then imagine it's Black Friday and their website crashes. The database just can't keep up.
Yeah, that's a disaster.
Right. Lost revenue, frustrated customers. Just a nightmare.
A total nightmare. You really don't want that to happen.
So in a high-stakes situation like that, which migration method would you recommend?
Well, in that case, minimizing downtime is absolutely crucial.
Okay.
I'd say Aurora Read Replica would be the best option.
Okay. And why is that?
Because, remember, you're creating that live mirror of the RDS database.
Mm-hmm.
And then promoting it to primary only takes a few minutes of downtime.
So the e-commerce site can stay up and running even during peak traffic.
Precisely. Customers can keep shopping without a hitch.
No lost revenue.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's shift gears a bit. Imagine a research institution.
Okay.
And they have a massive scientific database.
Lots of data.
Yeah, tons of data. And downtime is inconvenient for them, but their biggest fear is data loss.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can see that.
Right, because even losing a tiny bit of that data could set back research by months or even years.
Absolutely.
So in this case, speed isn't the most important factor. It's all about keeping that data safe.
Right. You need reliability.
Exactly. So what would you recommend for them?
I'd probably go with Snapshot Migration in that scenario. Sure. Because remember, snapshots capture the data at a specific moment, creating a very reliable copy that you can then restore to the Aurora environment.
And even though there is some downtime, the researchers can be confident that their data is secure.
Exactly. Peace of mind.
I like that. Okay, one last scenario. Let's imagine a financial institution.
High stakes.
Very high stakes. They're handling sensitive transactions all the time, right? So downtime is basically unacceptable. And even a small data discrepancy could be a huge problem.
Yeah, definitely a high-pressure situation.
So what would be the best approach in that case?
I think AWS DMS would be the way to go.
DMS, okay. And why is that?
Because of continuous replication. Remember, it's constantly streaming data from RDS to Aurora.
So that minimizes both downtime and the risk of data loss.
Exactly. It's like having a 247 bodyguard for your database.
I like that analogy. Okay, so we've looked at some different scenarios, but ultimately the best migration method really depends on your specific needs.
Absolutely. Every situation is unique.
Right, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
And that's why it's so important to carefully consider your priorities before making a decision.
I agree. All right, so I think it's time to dive into the technical details.
That's good.
Let's get into the nuts and bolts of each approach.
Let's do it.
All right, so back to snapshot migration.
Okay.
We know it creates that point-in-time snapshot, and it uses AWS's native tools.
Right.
Seems pretty straightforward, but are there any, hidden gotchas to watch out for?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that the database isn't actually frozen while the snapshot is happening.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier.
Right. But it's important to remember because it means there's a chance the snapshot might not capture the absolute latest changes.
So like we were saying before, it's more like a picture with a little bit of blur.
Exactly. It's not a perfect freeze frame.
Okay. So after the snapshot is created, you restore it to the new Aurora cluster.
Yep, that's the next step.
And that restoration process is where you have the most downtime.
That's right.
The larger the database, the longer it takes.
Exactly. And that's where incremental snapshots can really help.
Right, because you're only transferring the changes.
Exactly.
Much faster.
Much faster. Okay, so now let's move on to Aurora Read Replica.
Read Replica, okay.
So with Read Replica, you're creating that live mirror of your RDS instance using Aurora's replication features.
And that's where asynchronous replication comes in.
Right. And we talked about how there can be a little bit of a delay.
That lag.
Yes, the lag.
And that's something you really need to monitor, especially during the switchover.
Absolutely. You want that lag to be as close to zero as possible. Otherwise, you risk losing some of the recent updates.
So if your connection is lagging,
Yeah.
it's like playing a real-time strategy game.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Your actions might not register in time.
And you end up losing.
Exactly. So you really want to minimize that lag to make sure you don't lose any critical data.
Exactly. Now, when you promote the replica,
Yes.
there's a short period where it becomes read-only,
Oh.
and then it switches over and becomes the primary Aurora cluster.
And this whole process usually only takes a few minutes.
Right. But if something goes wrong, rolling back with Read Replica can be a bit tricky.
It's not as simple as with snapshot migration.
Yeah, you might have to promote a different replica or even switch back to the original RDS instance, which can be a lot more complicated.
So that's definitely something to consider.
For sure. Okay, now let's talk about AWS DMS.
DMS.
Continuous replication. Minimal downtime.
Sounds good.
But there's a bit more to it.
Okay.
You're basically setting up a replication instance.
What does that mean?
Well, it acts as a middleman between your RDS and Aurora.
So it's like a courier.
Exactly. It captures the changes from your RDS database and applies those changes to the Aurora database almost instantly.
And that's what helps minimize data loss.
Exactly. It's like having a real-time backup.
And one of the things I like about DMS is that it's pretty easy to roll back if you need to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You just stop the replication and your Aurora cluster stops getting updates. And you can keep using the original RDS.
Simple.
Very simple.
So DMS seems to offer the best data safety and the easiest rollback.
If those are your priorities, then yeah, DMS is a strong contender.
Okay, so we've gotten into the technical details of each method.
We've been under the hood.
We've seen how the gears turn, but I'm thinking about our listeners, and maybe some of them are feeling a bit overwhelmed.
It can be a lot to take in.
So what's the one key takeaway you would want them to remember about migrating from RDS to Aurora?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that there's no perfect answer for everyone.
I agree.
The best method depends on your specific needs, how comfortable you are with the technical stuff, and how much risk you're willing to take.
That's a really great point. It's not about finding the best method in some abstract sense.
Right.
It's about finding the best method for you.
Exactly. You have to find what works for your situation.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Ready to move on to the final part.
Let's wrap things up.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Talking about migrating from RDS to Aurora.
We really have a lot to think about.
Yeah, definitely. But before we wrap up, I think it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Migrating to Aurora isn't just about moving data around.
Right.
It's about upgrading your database.
Yeah, taking it to the next level.
Exactly. Unlocking a whole new level of performance and possibilities.
It's like swapping out that old engine for a turbocharged one.
I love that analogy. So we know that Aurora is significantly faster than traditional RDS.
Oh yeah, much faster.
But how much faster are we talking? Can we quantify that?
It depends on your workloads, of course.
Sure.
But some users have reported seeing 5 times faster performance.
5 times. Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
So that means applications run smoother,
Uh-huh.
queries are faster,
Yep,
and ultimately your users are happier.
exactly. Everyone wins.
Okay, so speed is a major advantage. But what about scalability? We hear a lot about Aurora's ability to handle tons of data and traffic spikes.
It's definitely one of Aurora's biggest strengths.
But is it really that good?
It really is. Aurora can scale incredibly well.
So it can handle those, huge data sets
No problem.
and those sudden bursts of traffic.
It can handle it all without breaking a sweat.
It's like having a database that, grows with your business.
Exactly. It adapts to your needs.
So if you're a company that's growing really fast,
Yeah?
or maybe you have, seasonal traffic spikes,
Right.
Aurora can handle it all, no problem.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the cost savings.
Ah, yes, the cost savings.
I know. Aurora can seem more expensive up front,
Right.
but when you consider the performance gains and the reduced administrative overhead,
Yeah.
it actually ends up being very cost-effective over the long term.
So it's like investing in a high-quality tool. Might cost a bit more initially, but it saves you money down the road.
And headaches.
And headaches, definitely. So migrating to Aurora, it's really an investment in the future of your database.
It really is. It gives you a powerful platform that can support your growth and help you handle whatever comes your way.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Why?
what's the one question you want our listeners to ask themselves as they're thinking about migrating to Aurora?
I think the most important question is, will this help me reach my business goals?
Ah, okay. So will it improve performance?
Yeah.
Will it allow them to scale?
Right.
Will it simplify database management?
All of those things.
And will it, reduce costs over time?
Exactly. If the answer is yes to any of those questions,
Yeah.
then migrating to Aurora is probably the right move.
It's all about aligning your technology with your business needs.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we've covered pretty much everything about migrating from RDS to Aurora.
I think so, yeah.
We explored the different methods, the technical details, the real-world examples, and the benefits.
It's been a good deep dive.
And hopefully our listeners are feeling a little bit more confident about tackling their own migration projects.
So,
And remember, the world of technology is always changing, so keep learning.
absolutely.
Stay curious and don't be afraid to experiment.
That's how you make progress.
All right, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time with another exciting deep dive into the world of tech. Until then, happy migrating.